People who bought a house. What is the weirdest thing you have found left by the previous owner? Before I met her, my wife got a call from someone she worked with saying they just bought an old house and in the city, and in it was a steamer trunk with her family name, not a common one, carved into the woodwork on one end. As it turns out, it was the trunk that her great-grandfather used when he came over from Germany, and it made the trip to my wife's hometown when he met her great-grandmother on a visit, and subsequently moved to her city to marry her. We now have it and it's full of family portraits and albums. My first house purchase in 2005, bought an old farmhouse that was built in 1923. The basement was filled with crap. We told them they needed to clean it all out before closing, but they didn't do it. The realtor asked if we wanted to postpone closing, and we decided no. Some of the stuff looked interesting enough. Maybe it will be worthwhile to go through. Most of it was just junk. Then, about halfway through, we were working our way from one end of the basement to the other, because you could barely walk through. I went to pick up what I thought was a small box, only to quickly realize it weighed at least 75 pounds. Upon further inspection, it wasn't a box, but a wooden square, 4 wide and about 12 x 12, with 2 thin masonite plywood covers on each side. On one edge were 2 bolts with wires coming off that had been cut. Very strange, had no idea what it was, but thought it was interesting. So I put it aside and we kept going. At the very back of the basement, once we cleared everything else out, was a rickety gray cabinet, built into the house. Inside, were numerous strange small tools, vials of mercury, vials of a strange powder, and thousands, literally thousands, of dice blanks. Some actual dice, but mostly blanks without the dots. They were all in little boxes labeled dice blanks. Also very strange. Not too long after that, I met a guy, and upon learning my address, he said, "Can I come over? My best friend grew up in that house." He came by, and proceeded to tell me stories for an hour and a half about his childhood best friend's eccentric father, someone who was a part of the Dixieland Mafia in the 60s and 70s, and who made a living traveling around the US as a traveling gambler. The enormously heavy box was an electromagnet. And the dice blanks were for him to make his own loaded dice with a little bit of metal powder under the inlaid dot, so he could set up his own table with the electromagnet underneath, and turn it on when he wanted to persuade the dice. He told me many other stories, including that there was no doubt in his mind that he had killed someone. Pretty fascinating. My house was a foreclosure. The previous owners let their kids dump a bunch of paint in the basement and paint on the basement walls. My favorite was some crudely painted boobs with the words "Herb Dick" painted next to it. I've left it up for the entire 11 years I've been here. You don't mess with art. We had our air ducts cleaned before we moved in. They also inspected them with a camera. Someone wrote "fuck you" deep inside one of the ducts. We thought it was hilarious. It's not really weird, but I think it's kind of a nice story. One of the kids' rooms has a shelf going all around the top edge, and when my kid was putting stuff up there, they found a letter from the previous kid. The letter welcomed them to the room, etc., and asked them to take special care of a rose bush in the front yard that was their special rose bush. My kid thought it was really cool to have that connection with the previous kid. That they wired a room by connecting the outlet with an extension cord inside the wall. A glass bowl. It was kind of pretty, with horizontal blue stripes. We kept fruit in it. We thought about dropping it off at the local charity shop, but never got around to it. Then one day I was at an antique fair and I saw for sale glass bowls that looked almost identical to ours. I went home to get my bowl and brought it to be assessed. Turns out it was a vintage Orifice crystal bowl. The assessor valued it at around $800. We no longer keep fruit in it. These assholes. I bought a house from, stuck a little skeleton figurine dressed up in a little monk's robe behind the exhaust vent in the furnace closet. Just about shit myself when I opened up that door and there was this tiny skeletal hand poking out. I thought it was a fucking dead baby. Not my house, but the school my friend worked at. A pipe had leaked and ruined a wall in the building, one of the oldest schools in the city. It was a beautiful property. Anyways, the pipe leaked, so they pulled down the ruined wall and behind the wall found a door. A fully furnished apartment was there. Had a coal burning stove to heat it. Early 1900s appliances and decor. It was for the caretaker of the school. Not really weird, but they left a typed out and printed note about the house and how to take care of it. Detailing all the plant life in the backyard and how to prep for the winter. Described how to take care of the hot tub and gave random TID bits about the electrical. They were good people, LOL. A Diary of an American Soldier in WW2, South Pacific Theater. Found it above a door when remodeling 20 plus years ago. My wife and I tried everything we could think of to find a descendant, but to no avail. My ex-wife found, behind a drawer in a built-in cupboard, a lovely lockbox contains several nice pocket watches and family heirlooms. The great part was that with a little sleuthing, we found the son of the man who originally built that house and reunited these items to the family. It was a wonderful experience from start to finish. $1,200 in cash above the door on the inside the closet. I found it while painting. My wife and I bought a house shortly after we were married in the early 80s. Cleaning before we moved in, we found a WW2 inflatable life raft with a water desalination drinking kit, rolls of green grave grass, the stuff they put around open graves in cemeteries so your feet don't get muddy, bins of beads to make rosaries, amateur paintings of Jesus that were nailed to the wall in the attic, nailed not hung, a Nazi knife, a grenade casually forgotten behind tools on a shelf in the back shed, an old broken cedar hope chest filled with the cut-off bottoms of hundreds of denim jean legs, a child's potty chair, filled with old poop, hidden under a built-in bench in the dining room. These are only the things that came to mind first. As you can imagine, we got a pretty good deal on the house. It was worth the small cost of renting the dumpster, calling the police bomb squad and the hassle of selling some of the artifacts. Oh. When we pulled up the carpet in the living room a few years later, we discovered the floor beneath it was custom linoleum tile inlaid with geometric shapes depicting soccer players and soccer balls. Man shrugging, light skin tone. Wasn't a purchase, but I was showing a house to a couple and we couldn't believe the reported square footage. It looked like a nice 1700 SQ fort house in a semi-rural community, but the square footage on the listing said about 4,500. I was sure it was a typo. Turns out most of it was basement. Think Buffalo Bill's basement that just goes on and on with random rooms. Place was vacant, lighting wasn't great, and we get to a dead-end room down there and turn on the lights and there is this porcelain doll just chilling in the middle of the room. Only thing left in the house. Husband yells, "Fuck this," and we all run out. We ruled out that whole neighborhood as an option, for reasons. A friend bought a house that had a zigzag tunnel leading to a bomb shelter. Empty with some rust, it was otherwise just a dirty room. The only thing cool about it was that it was built under a pond, so it had a skylight to let in light. She boarded it up when she divided the house into apartments. Not mine, and it was a rental, but when some of my high school friends went off to college in the early 90s they rented a house, and whoever lived there before hid weed all over the place. Probably about an ounce, in total, but it was everywhere. Pull up the corner of the carpet. Weed. On top of the refrigerator. Weed. Back of the shelves in the hall closet. Weed. Either they were the most forgetful stoners ever or they did it as a surprise for the new residents. The acreage my wife and I moved to 3 years ago had a bucket full of wrapped dinosaur bones. Took them to our local museum where they confirmed they are roughly 68 million years old. Hadrosaur. Pretty cool. Phone sockets everywhere. It was a 2-up 2-down house with a truly excessive number of phone sockets and some in weird places like above the kitchen door or in the attic, which was not finished as rooms but had no ladder and wasn't even boarded, just rafters. Why? The house had no alarm system or anything like that might need phone sockets. There was absolutely no logical reason we could see for some of those placements. Like the one above the kitchen door wouldn't have made any sense at all to plug into a phone or other device with what was surrounding it. Was someone making secret landline calls perched on a rafter in the attic? I also found multiple packets of corn and bunion treatments behind the kickboards in the kitchen. A 90s AM/FM radio with a Backstreet Boys cassette tape in it. I felt like I found an ancient relic when I came across that thing. I still have it. Not weird, but behind the hot water tank was a handwritten "I love you" from the husband to wife. Smiley face. We bought the house from the CEO of the company which we franchise from. It was her childhood home where her mother lived till the day she died. In true rich person fashion, they didn't care to clean out the house before selling it. Just told us we can do whatever we want with the old lady stuff that was there. We found a hidden box of spicy letters, from the old lady to her affair partner spanning many years. That was fun to give to the CEO. My parents' house. A previous owner fancied himself a DIY guy, we think. First week we're in the house, we call an electrician to get economy 7 installed. He shuts off all the breakers, questions why the house hasn't burned down, and wonders how the hell the house passed inspection. So, 2 weeks into our new house they have to get the whole place rewired for a small fortune. Over the last 40 years it seems every time they renovate something new and interesting thing shows up. Recently the kitchen sink kept clogging. After a brief search we found the drain was rooted under the kitchen floor and concreted over. It had finally cracked under the weight and was leaking into the foundations. Found a manuscript about an uncle who takes his young niece in after her parents die. Then they fall in love. It was so badly written and disturbing. We also found a giant dildo, a photo of an all-man throuple glamour shot style, and a love letter written on college letterhead to a 13-year-old girl. All in the same attic. East Nashville. Lived here 3 years, slowly renovating it since it seemingly hadn't been touched since the 80s. Got a new kitten this year and she was trouble. Always getting places she shouldn't. She got in a closet under the stairs, and behind a piece of drywall. Couldn't coax her out, so I just pulled the drywall down, and found her standing on a few old boxes. Pulled them out, and it ended up being around $10,000 of silver and old coins that it seems were put there in the 90s and forgotten about. Tucked away in a crawl space under the kitchen, the previous owner placed a dummy with a horrifying Halloween mask on it. Went in to replace a pipe and had to replace my undies. Not me. My friend was cleaning out his garage and found a stack of vintage porn mags high up on a shelf. Like 70s style, raunchy stuff. He brought them to a party and just tossed them casually on the table. The former owner put googly eyes on all the doorknobs. Very strange. LOL. A basement room that was fully decked out as a dungeon. Faux stone walls, a stocks, like where you lock your head and hands in a la old England, candle scones on the walls, a metal barred cage in the corner from floor to ceiling. Oh, and the closet had a load of toys, some normal, some not so typical. We bought a house being foreclosed on. We gave him an extra month after closing and $2,000 to help with his move. Still had to have the sheriff come remove him. Anywho, was doing some cleanup and remodeling before we moved in. Whole house was carpeted. When I started ripping it out there was a giant blood stain that started in a downstairs spare bedroom that then trailed up to the master bath where there was another stain. His wife had left him, so I had to call the realtor to find out if anyone knew where she was. Turns out he had shot a deer in the yard and gutted it in the house. What a hassle. Had to rip up and install new subfloors. My vegan ex-wife was not thrilled. First time I took a hot shower in our new home. The steam covered the mirror, only to reveal the phrase "Hello, I see you" in large finger-drawn writing. It freaked me out for a second, but made me laugh soon after that. It was such an inconspicuous yet obvious thing to leave for the new homeowner, me. Didn't buy the house. Rented. Built in 1904. There was a walk-in closet food pantry in the kitchen with built-in cabinets. The cabinets on one wall, after living there for a year, I noticed had a gap between the wall and the cabinet. Drunk, I put my hand back there and something moved. I scooted it out and it was a small box. Turned out to be a violet ray from the late 1800s. Designed by Nicholas Tesla. It still works, too. But the last time I plugged it in it electrocuted me slightly. I still have it. https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/violet_ray. Asterisk: the previous owners had cut the main beam holding up the second floor in order to run a heating duct. What's this big block of wood? No idea, hand me the reciprocating saw. Surprise. Asterisk: the walls were insulated with black paper and newspapers from 1922, and included an article on the church down the road. Was it the priest's job to be entertaining and put bums in seats, or was it people's moral duty to show up even if the sermon was boring? The church turned into a daycare, and was then torn down to make way for townhouses, so I guess we know how that one turned out. The painter found a letter from owner's ex-wife to him. She wrote about how he was the best thing ever and she regretted a lot of things she did to him and then proceeded to blame him for everything wrong with her life. It was very odd. Old cigarette packs hidden all over the basement behind where paneling ended randomly, and hundreds of spent cigarette butts in a crawl space. Clearly, someone was sneaking their smokes. Probably buried at this point, but I chopped off the tip of my thumb with an axe, and kept the tip of it in a small plastic jar, think urinalysis jar, that the hospital gave me. I put it in my freezer and kept it there for about 4 years. When I moved out I got 3 states away in a U-Haul when I went flushed face. We left the finger. I can only imagine the new owner's surprise. Not weird but sort of touching. The house was about 100 years old. After moving in I went up to the attic, which was a bit difficult to access. I wasn't sure what I would find. All that was there was a shoebox. An old brand. Anyone else here remember Red Goose shoes? In it was stuff, a couple of old army patches, a scout knife, some rock and roll buttons and a couple of letters. From the letter I got a name and looked him up. He lived a town over. I called him and told him if he'd like it to come and get it. So a 60-ish guy showed up. He was really appreciative. The patches and the letter were from his older brother. He said he was about 12 and used to hang out in the attic and hide his stuff. It was nice to reunite the box with its owner. The house we moved into in the 70s was one where it had been added onto a couple times and the exterior remodeled to look consistent. But the original part dated to the mid-1700s. Deep in the basement crawl space under the old part there was a short bricked-up protuberance attached to the wall with the letters "RIP" chiseled into the top. We used to joke about it until we found out it had been a place where midwives delivered babies at one point. Then the jokes got a little macabre. 4 screws and nails used to secure everything. It's as though they bought a bucket of them and just had to use them everywhere. Big or small projects, everything was screwed or nailed together with 4 screws and nails. My friend got left 5 200L barrels of moonshine by previous owners.